My name's Craig Chartier. I'm the director of the Plymouth Archaeological Rediscovery Project, and today is October 18th, 2008. It's the last day of our excavations out here at the Duxbury Second Meeting House site. We started on October 6th, and we've been digging every day continually. With probably over 200 volunteers who've worked on this project in total. All local people, most without much archaeological training, but all of them willing to learn out here. So they've been doing all the excavations and all the work, and pretty much all the findings that we have from this project are from them. We first got interested in this project as a way of trying to locate some of the historical sites that are within the town. When we approached the Duxbury Rural Historical Society about this, and they informed us about this site here, the Second Meeting House site, as being one of the properties they owned. And we began collaborating on the project, and the First Parish Church is involved in it as well. And the three of our organizations working together have made a real large-scale project we've been able to do quickly, do very conscientiously, and we've found a lot of important and informative material. This whole area that we're in here, Morton's Hole area, has been inhabited by native people for upwards of at least 9,000 years or so. There was one spear point that's been found in the area that dates back about 9,000 years. Basically, when Morton's Hole was just a stream or a spring head draining down into what was not even a bay, it was just dry land. All of Duxbury Bay, like when you see the dry land at low tide around here, basically it was dry land back until 5,000 years ago, going way out, several miles out.
Sorry.
That's okay. You want to show them something?
What'd you find? Oh, you found another chip. And there we go, just like I was just saying. It's one of the flakes from Native Americans making stone tools. It's a piece of rhyolite. That's definitely something worth keeping. We're finding a lot of those sorts of chips. That's most of the evidence that we find of native people around here. So about 9,000 years ago, people were first living here. And then around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, we actually ended up finding a lot of evidence about people living all over the place in Massachusetts, but especially here in Duxbury. There's a large Native American site nearby that dates to about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. And most of the material we're finding on our site here can be pretty easily dated to 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. By that time, most of the tree species that we have around now, most of the plant species that are native to New England were established. Things like chestnut were really common, hickories, hazel. So the forest would have been very familiar to us if we would have gone into them 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. And native people at that time weren't practicing any agriculture or horticulture. They weren't growing any plants as far as we know. So these are people who are traveling around, hunting deer, having base camps that they travel back to, bring the deer back to the base camp where it would be processed, and staying at base camp for a little while and then moving on again. So I think what we have here at the Second Meeting House site is either a slight edge of a larger base camp that might extend out towards Morton's Hole, or it might be just a place that people would stop over every once in a while, even maybe as little as once every 100 years. You can't really tell exactly, but we know that the points that we are finding, the spear points and such, date back at least 3,000 to 4,000 years. So people were living here in Duxbury, continually for that whole period. And then by the 17th century, this was one of the first suburbs of Plymouth, basically. Folks like Miles Standish, Elder Brewster, John Alden, some of the other well-known Pilgrim settlers started settling up to this area. And by the early 1630s, they'd been here long enough and been established enough that they actually wanted to be separated away from the congregation in Plymouth. They wanted permission to set up their own meeting house up here in Duxbury because they said it was just too hard traveling down to Plymouth for the Sabbath meetings every Sunday and having to go there in the wintertime and stay there in the wintertime. And so about somewhere around 1635 or so, they constructed their first meeting house, which we think is over in the burial ground area. It was a Reverend Huygen back in the 19th century who established that this is the area in general where the first and second meeting house was, and this is the area where people like Miles Standish and John Alden were buried. So we had that general information to go on, and then as part of the archaeological research for this project, we had a man named Russ Kempton from New England Geophysical do a ground-penetrating radar survey. If you would have been out here when he was doing that, it would have looked like he was walking back and forth with a lawnmower. It's just a small machine, and it gives you a readout that kind of looks like a fish finder readout. It'll show nice flat surface, and then it'll show bumps where there are maybe graves, or if there's any sort of disturbance in the subsoil. It'll show up on his readout, and then he takes all that information and he's able to produce larger maps that show in general what's happening. It just sends radar waves into the ground, and they go down and bounce off and come back up and are recorded by the machine. Just the same way that radar in general works, and this is just radar that works in the ground basically. So he started at the far western side of the burial ground, and just to test the machine to see what the soils were like over there, to be able to compare it to the soils within our project area here. And as he was coming across the burial ground, he noticed that as he came to the rise that's towards the center of the burial ground, he didn't find any graves. He found unidentified graves, unmarked graves, to the west side of the rise, and as he came over to the other side of the rise, he also found unmarked graves there as well. But on top of the rise, he didn't find any unmarked graves, but he found some sort of like 20 by 22 foot anomaly. He's not sure what it is, but it's a sort of a big area where the soil's been disturbed. So he couldn't actually tell what it was, but the fact that there are no graves on top of the hill and there's that weird 20 by 22 foot area makes it possible that could be the site of the first meeting. Differences in the soil, other segments of the walls, and so we're able to actually trace the walls of the structure, and it looks like it's 40 by 30 feet, which is just what the records say that it was. So that worked out really well, that it came out exactly right. But coming into the project, we had certain research questions that we wanted to try to answer with the work out here, and we really didn't want to stop digging until we had answered those research questions. And some of those things were, was this the site of the second meeting house? We didn't know if there was going to be anything here. And so we wanted to find artifacts that we could date to the time of the second meeting house, which we did. We wanted to find any kind of architectural evidence to see how the meeting house was constructed. And some of the things we found that helped to give evidence to that are small pieces of window leads, the leads that would hold old diamond-shaped window panes in place. We found a fragment of that. We found pieces of window glass that had been cut at an angle, at a curve, and so we think those are part of a pulpit window that would be behind the pulpit, sort of a fancier window that would be rectangular on the bottom and then have a curved upper portion of it. We found a lot of handmade nails, which date to the right time period. A good number of brick fragments, like hundreds of brick fragments, very small ones and a few larger pieces, but we're not really sure what they were using the bricks for. They may have had part of the foundation may have been brick. They may have replaced sections of the foundation or replaced sections of the sills with brick or something at some time. We're not really sure. We know it didn't have a hearth or a chimney, and so the bricks couldn't have come from that. So how this correlates with the Native American site that was across the street. And as I said before, we found evidence going back 3,000 to 4,000 years, and it looks like this was just a stopover location. It wasn't a place that people really had settled for a long period of time. We didn't find any pottery or any evidence of people living here during the woodland period, the time when they were starting to grow crops and that sort of thing. So seems like it was always just wooded area, and then later in the historic period, open area basically. And we did find evidence too of what happened after the meeting house was gone. We found what looked like a cartway running from the street up to the north to the fence, the property line fence that's here, and it had a lot of 19th century material inside of it. And so we think that after the meeting house was gone, that cartway may have sort of skirted around the side of the burial ground, or may have connected this Chestnut Street with somebody else's house that was out there to the north or something like that. We're not sure. We'll have to try to compare it with some maps and see what we can find from there that correlates with it. But like I said, we're wrapping up today. We're finishing up digging where the foundation trenches were, and just finishing taking down all the other units down to the level where we can stop at. And the next thing's going to be to probably line all the pits with plastic, so if someone comes back in the future, they'll know where we stopped digging. And then we have to backfill all the holes, mark the locations where we think the corners were, and probably eventually there'll be a sign put up saying that we excavated here at one time, and maybe an interpretive plaque saying what we found, and we're leaving a good part of the site intact. That way someone could come back in the future, hundreds of years from now, and do more archaeology here when they have better techniques and different research questions. So.
Thanks.